And welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Knowledge. On today's episode, we're going to talk about something very dangerous happening in the hobby right now. And that's a lot of people just saying that they're not going to be grading cards anytime soon. And I don't know if this is just people talking about PSA in particular, that they're not going to grade with any other grading companies. They're just going to wait for PSA to open back up and start accepting submissions again. But I don't think that's the case. I think people are just talking about grading in general. And I don't know if people are worried about, the bulk slab era that's coming, but I got to ask an honest question. And don't take this the wrong way. But what the fuck are you grading? Why are you worried about the bulk slab era? Are you that far stretched out on the cards you're grading you aren't actually grading good cards? Grading is not new in this hobby, but once turnaround times has gone up and the fact that PSA is shut down, like everybody talks almost as if it's the end of grading. I mean, I know that's not true. You know that's not true. But the way people are talking and their actions are making it sound like grading is over. It's not over. It's just going to take a longer time to get your cards back. It's not the end of the world. It definitely sucks, but, it's just the way this hobby is moving. This hobby is moving from, raw cards to just grading. And it's always been moving in that direction, but I think we really saw that got really pushed to the forefront in 2020, 2021, because we saw the price differential between graded and non-graded cards being so great that people realized, hey, I need to grade my cards in order to get the highest realized dollar for these cards. And what's really scary is I'm seeing content creators say the same thing, that they're not going to be grading cards and their listeners are taking their advice. That is a very dangerous, very disingenuous comment to make to your listeners because you can hurt them in the long run. Grading cards is extremely important in this hobby, especially for the long term of this hobby. And if you're just in this hobby and you're getting ready to make your exit strategy and you don't believe in this hobby anymore, don't grade your cards because it's going to take a long time to get these cards back. But if you are in this hobby for the long term, and for the long term, I'm talking longer than it's going to take you to get your cards back, you still should be taking advantage of grading for all your cards that you think are worthy. And when it comes to worthy cards, I got 3 words for you. Condition, condition, condition. That's it. That's all it needs. It's condition. And then maybe another 3 words, probably like vintage, rarity, scarcity. Those are the words you need to keep in mind when you're grading cards. But to say you're not grading cards and you don't really have a solid reasoning behind it, I think it's just a very scary, very slippery slope. And more importantly, it's very, short-minded to just have this very narrow view of grading. And just because, we are going to see a big influx of cards coming, it's just scary to think that people think that grading, influx of cards is going to crash the market so much that their raw cards are no longer worth it to be grading, meaning that whatever raw cards they would have graded, they believe that by having those cards slabbed up and graded, they're going to actually make those cards in the long run be worth less money. That is very short-sighted, dangerous thinking when it comes to this hobby. And with the new framework that is this hobby, one of the very big parts of that framework is graded cards. Of course, there's still raw cards, sealed product, vintage, modern, all this different stuff that combines to make the framework of what the current hobby is. But with that said, you have to still understand something that's extremely, extremely, extremely important. For this hobby, there were a lot of people, and there still are a lot of people that have always been in the trenches grading what could be considered lower dollar amount cards. And then there was always a different group of people that only strictly graded high dollar cards. That's something very important to keep in mind because like I said, when I talk about being in the trenches, the people that grade the low dollar cards but still were able to turn profits, it takes a lot of work and they really grinded it out, but they were able to make extremely successful businesses. And, there's a different group too that were able to do both. You look at like the Charizard Authority, TCA Gaming, right? I don't like to mention any other content creators ever on this channel because I don't think that's fair. But I will say something very positive about what he did. He did two things. He was able to grade a lot of very rare cards and did very well doing that. But, Rusty also graded a lot of low dollar amount cards, and he was the first to grade a lot of cards. When I'm talking cards that had very low populations, he started a lot of that, like call it lower tier grading. And those cards in the long term ended up being fantastic investments for him. And, he was in the trenches doing a lot of that, what people would consider, and I'm doing this with quotations, ungradable cards, and made a huge business about that and, became very successful. Yes, he has everything else going for him, but that was still a piece of what he did. So for people coming into this hobby that are newer to say that like grading is dead or they're going to wait to grade, like I said, it's just so, like, I don't know, it's just so short-handed or short-sighted, I should say. It's just dangerous, and I don't know how else to like portray that fact of how dangerous it is for people to not still be grading their cards, especially if you have cards right now that are worthy of grading. I'm not telling you to go grade everything that's not worthy, but if you have cards that are worthy, the prices for grading is the lowest it will ever be. Meaning for CGC, you'll never see the price go any lower. PSA, there's a very, very small chance that PSA ever drops their prices. I personally seriously doubt that. I bet you never see PSA's prices ever drop lower than what they currently are today. So that means if you do have cards that you plan on getting graded in the future, why are you waiting? And don't say you're waiting for turnaround times to change, because if you graded them today, your cards are still going to be first in line to however many months down the line that turnaround times hopefully change and get less. You're still going to have to wait even longer to have your cards graded. So I don't really like that argument. I just want everybody to be very smart and understand that there are two sides of this coin. And something very important to take note of, and for whatever reason has gotten lost in the shuffle, is that this hobby is not always on an uptrend. There are dips to it. And I'm afraid that so many people have just had a rocket strapped to their back that they forgot that that even exists. There are ups and downs to this hobby. And when the downs come, they're still not terrible. When you compare it in 5-year timelines, meaning if you look 5 years ago, prices were much lower. If you look at 5 years before that, which would be 10 years, prices are even lower. But in the long run, prices always go up, but they do dip. I just need people to be understanding that that's going to happen. And if you're not in this hobby for the long term, and at the very bare minimum, I said long term, 5 years. You have to be in this for at least, a decent amount of time, and you'll do fine. As long as you're able to hold, you don't panic sell, you don't get nervous. In the long term, you can do well. If you want to play like the day trader flipper mentality where you're just trying to capitalize on every peak and every valley, you can try that. It's very hard. It's much easier just like the dollar cost average of this hobby to constantly be buying, whether the hobby's up or the hobby's down, because in the long term, you'll do just fine. But I'm just getting nervous to see a lot of people out there that are getting very nervous in the near term. And, just go back and look at the charts. There's charts out there that show the progression of prices for Pokemon. It's not just a straight line. There's ups and downs. There's hills and valleys to it. You just got to be in it for the long term, and you're going to do fine. But in order to do fine in the hobby, you have to be diversified. And again, to touch base on what I said earlier in this video, I know I already said it, but it's important to repeat. You got to have graded cards. Graded cards is a huge pillar of this hobby right now. And it's going to be a huge pillar from now until forever. It's not going away. It's always going to be like what's in one of the things that are important. Just as important as sealed product, just as important as raw, just as important as diversifying your portfolio is graded cards. So don't shun away from them for no reason. Just to say, I'm going to stop grading cards just because, and have no real good reason. Look at the market around you. Look at the history. Don't get caught up in 2020. It's easy for people to get caught up in 2020. I see it happening all the time. 2020 is an outlier of this hobby, like the trajectory that everything went. But in the long term of this hobby, it's not just all ups. So you will see downs, but just play it out. And don't start to make foolish decisions. Stop trying to chase the dollar. If you missed out on a lot of these good deals, you missed out on them. Learn from your mistake. Move on. Continue to find the good deals. There are always good deals in this hobby. I don't care if it was 2020 at the peak, there were still areas of the market that were extremely undervalued. And you just have to continue to grow in this hobby and find the, undervalued and potentially low dollar amount areas of the hobby that you see growth in. And you can be wrong. It's okay. No one's going to be right 100% of the time. So I'm going to tell you, it's okay to be wrong. There's probably not a lot of YouTube channels that are going to tell you it's okay to fail. It's okay to fail a little bit, as long as you're learning from your mistakes and you continue to grow in this hobby. And that's so important. And the only way you will ever find undervalued areas in this hobby is if your knowledge in this hobby grows and you become a smarter collector, investor, whatever you want to be. And the only way you're going to do that is to continue to learn, continue to be smart, continue to grind. Pokemon, historically, is not like as easy as it's been, right? Like, yeah, right now, even today, Pokemon is very easy, especially when it comes to like a lot of modern stuff. Look at all these modern booster boxes you can get for $100 at pre-orders and almost instantly sell them for a 20% profit, like as soon as they get released, or potentially more. Sometimes I was seeing 50% profit some people were making on, modern booster boxes, just getting them on the day of release. That stuff is crazy. They're great returns for the near term, and I'm afraid that people are seeing like the easy money and they're forgetting that there is like money to be made in the trenches. And again, one of the ways to make money in the trenches is to grade lower dollar value cards and still turn a profit, whether it's $10 or $20 or $30. $10, $20, $30 are still respectable gains. And, those dollar amounts are after card costs, grading fees, seller's fees, everything in between, shipping, everything added up to make $10, $20, $30 on a card, historically, is not bad. A lot of people did that for a long time, including myself. There's nothing to be ashamed of for doing that stuff. And, it takes a lot of work to, make money off low dollar amount cards, because you could be like me. I'm a very selfish collector. I refuse to sell anything that is part of my personal collection or what I consider high grade, high end. So what do I have to do? I have to force myself to sell these lower dollar amount cards. And I've always done it. And I'm continuing to do it, and it's easy. But you guys have to understand that's still part of the hobby. If you're only focused on like the huge, crazy chase cards of sets that have, pretty hard pull rates, you're going to have to rip a lot of packs or spend a big dollar amount in order to obtain the raw cards, and then really hope that you guess the condition well enough that it's going to grade high. Like, there's a lot of risks to be taken there. So just be careful. Just be smart. And don't listen to everyone. Make your own decision in the long run. Where do you see this hobby in 5 to 10 years? Do you see grading still being a thing? Do you see grading costs being more than they are today? If your answer is yes to both of those, then what is your real reason for waiting to grade? If you want to tell me you're just a PSA fanboy and you're going to wait for PSA, that's a good enough answer for me. I understand. That makes sense. If that's what you want to do it. I'm not going to argue that. But if you don't have that as your reason, then you really got to consider, like, why are you worried about grading? But anyways, guys, just me ranting again. Hey, listen, if you're new to this channel, you somehow made it to the end of this video and you're not subscribed to this channel, hit that subscribe button. But other than that, with the YouTube algorithm, if you guys hit the like button, helps me out a lot. But other than that, I'll catch you on the next video.